Hey everybody, Dan here with Pain Free You. Today I wanted to talk about this concept, how the now what mindset or mentality can help you in your recovery. So, gorgeous day, smile, relax, drop your shoulders, breathe slow. This is a micro meditation. Can bring you some calm. Settle your heart rate, settle your nervous system. You can do it anywhere. So keep doing that. And again, I wanted to talk about how this now what mentality can help with your recovery. So if you're following my channel, you're probably dealing with some type of mind-body symptoms, what I call perceived danger symptoms, basically symptoms created by the brain when it perceives danger. And so during this journey, we can have some really up and down experiences, right? And sometimes things are kicking our butt, really challenging times. And so it's in those moments that I encourage you to use this now what mentality. Okay, really struggling now. Wow, the symptoms are really strong. Now what? Okay? Because if we don't ask that question and make a proactive decision, a lot of times the decision is made by our default, which is often, for many of us, panic, freak out, worry, catastrophic thinking, I'll never get better types of thinking. So asking the now what question allows you to pause in the middle of that chaos and say, well, what is my next best step? My next best action? And it's really important to do this, because if you don't, the default just runs the show. And we don't want the default of fear and panic to run the show. And the reason for that is, if the perception of danger, aka fear, conscious or subconscious, because a lot of times people say, I'm not even thinking fearful thoughts. Yeah, but the subconscious is running the show. So if the perception of danger is what determines the presence or the intensity of symptoms, asking now what and taking a second to pause on the next best action or response, mentally and emotionally, is a really good thing. Because what we're trying to do is interrupt that default panic, the default freak out, the default catastrophic doom and gloom type of worries. We want to interrupt the brain going back to every horrible thing you've ever read about this and that and this type of a symptom, and other people claiming how awful it is and that there's no cure and all that crap that you read on the internet or even are told by some other people. We want to interrupt that. We want to get in the way of the default. And we do that with a brief pause, a deep breath, and say, now what? Because with a proactive answer to that, you can say, now what? Let me remind myself what's going on. What causes symptoms, the perception of danger, not actual damage or illness. Now look, there are cases where we hurt ourselves or we do have illness. But once you've done the assessments and you recognize that most chronic symptoms are caused by a brain hypervigilant, always looking out for danger, and turning on symptoms as a warning to its perceived danger. And so, once you recognize that that's how the system, the human system works, and that applies to you, the answer to now what do I do now, can be a proactive calming and reassurance and trusting and settling, as opposed to the default panic, right? So this now what mentality is really your tool to interrupt the default panic. And we want to be aware of that and do it proactively, because, comment below, let me know if the default is running your show. You wake up, symptoms are there, we launch into fear, panic, anxiety, worries, catastrophic thinking, what's wrong with me, research, go back and look at everything I've been reading that tells me there's no hope. That's the default for so many of us, and we want to interrupt that. So if you are in a place where your symptoms have really gotten your attention, like, hello Dan, come on, pay attention. Pause, smile. Okay, now what? What is the next best thing I can do to help myself in this moment? I'm not going down the panic roadway. I'm not going to go down freak out highway, because that never helps. So think about this now what mentality, and think about how you can utilize it anytime you're being challenged. It doesn't have to be physical symptoms. It can be anxiety, depression, just overall stress. Now what? Proactively choose your next step. Don't let the default fear, panic, freak out, despair run your days. Because if you do, it's going to be harder for things to settle down. So I'm going to wrap it up here. And as always, folks, I love you, and we will see you tomorrow. Take care.